Thank you. You're most kind. In fact, while we were having a little chat amongst ourselves before the panel, Ravi had suggested, why don't you speak before me? I think I was foolish not to take up the offer. The work in biodiversity has a very interesting angle. Typically in sustainability, we talk about using less. Use less energy, use less water, use less of this, use less pesticides, use less chemicals and so on. It's all about less. But biodiversity, interestingly, is all about more. More bees, more birds, more trees, more water, better ecosystem services and so on. So actually, when work happens in sustainability, when I see the conversations in a sustainability group, you actually have to change track when you're talking about biodiversity, because the whole mental frame is different from conservation to rejuvenation. Another very interesting thing happens that, on one side, there is willful, rapacious destruction of biodiversity. Now, I don't know, there'll be ways to handle that. But in conversations in the IBBI, we'd heard a story about how the local community had taken a location of an industry to task because in the process of setting up the industry, they had destroyed the habitat of a variety of snake. As it turns out, I don't think the people in the industry even knew what they were doing. But it raised a question that even as we go about setting our units at various different places, there is a great likelihood that even without knowing, we would be causing damage to the biodiversity in that area. And having become a part of IBBI, one of the things that happened is a biodiversity study would happen in a new location before a building went up or a factory set up. So I think to that extent, it's a very positive step forward and a good contribution for IBBI for our group. Another very interesting thing happens that and this conversation I was having with a colleague of mine in the morning about how a couple of these studies about what a future location can do to local biodiversity has actually excited a whole bunch of our location heads to try and figure out how can they rejuvenate biodiversity in that area or create an impact which they're not necessarily obliged to do, but do it because it's a contribution to the community and the society. So suddenly I'm hearing conversations about how we are setting up butterfly parks and how we are enabling beekeeping and so on. Not necessarily in the CSR space, but purely from an interest to keep biodiversity going. So if inadvertent destruction is something that well-meaning industries do, there must be a way to try and deal with this. And the thought came while Suman was speaking, and I was talking to Ravi about that why don't you help us then tell us that even without knowing, what are the ways in which you're harming biodiversity in your area? So I would be very keen, Ravi, if nothing else, to take up a couple of sites and see, are we doing something inadvertently and is there something we can do better? Because willful, rapacious destruction, I don't know how to control. But inadvertent destruction of biodiversity, surely we can try. But to be able to try that, I suppose you would need to have interest and innovation would help. So let me share with you one or two things which colleagues of mine have done across the group. When we were setting up our largest automotive manufacturing plant in Chakan, one of the managers came up with a very interesting idea. He said, look, there are these pollutants which we deal with in a certified CPCB way, give it to a certified person and so on. But there is an interesting way to do this, that if you were to put those pollutants in a certain kind of soil and have certain kind of high transpiration rate trees, then the nature takes care of those pollutants and actually rejuvenates the whole ecosystem in that space. We tried it out, and there is a large part of our plant now which has trees, which you typically won't find in an automotive manufacturing plant. But they are not trees for trees' sake. They have a purpose. And the purpose that they are serving there is to reduce the pollution and rejuvenate that environment. Similarly, about 10 years ago, 8 to 10 years ago, when the group committed to plant at least 1 million trees every year, one of our colleagues came up with the idea that, look, instead of just planting trees for the sake of trees, can we have a higher purpose? And it turns out that in the Araku Valley in Andhra Pradesh, about 1 million trees get planted every year. They get planted on the prior land that was barren, and every smallholder farmer looks after 1 acre of plantation. Now this plantation is all horticulture trees, and this has a gestation period of 4 to 5 years. The first round of trees that were done in Araku are now coming to fruit, and this is expected to result in doubling to tripling of the income of the person who had that barren land from which he was getting nothing. So whatever other income he was making, the selling of fruit from this 1 acre of land will double or triple his household income. So not only does this take care of biodiversity or address issues of biodiversity, afforestation, but also deals with issues of livelihood. And that is a very innovative way of looking at the issue of just afforestation. It's not as if that we don't plant trees randomly at various different places. Some of our locations do, but the large majority goes into projects like this. Again, when setting up locations, we have a business in holidays which sets up resorts. And one of the resorts it was setting up was in Coorg, in what was an abandoned coffee plantation. The plantation wasn't doing well. So they had a great opportunity. They could have completely raised the hill and made a beautiful resort. Well, they did make a beautiful resort, but they didn't cut down a single tree. They are at pains to explain to the guests that, the buildings in their group have been doing not necessarily simply because they have an interest in making a difference to the community and to try and make a contribution in any way they can, knowing full well that there may be inadvertent ways in which we are causing harm as well. Actually, all this kind of work has led to us framing a definition of sustainability for the group. We are all aware of the definition of the Brundtland Commission and so on. But the challenge we faced was to take that definition and convert it into actionable areas of work. So we said, while philosophically and philanthropically this is a great definition, let's try another one. So the one that we've come up with, and which seems to be the working definition within the group, is to enable enduring business by empowering the community and rejuvenating the environment. Now, when we look at biodiversity from this lens, it makes eminent business sense. And as you can see, different parts of the group have taken steps to enable their own business, enable enduring business by rejuvenating the environment in some ways. The effort will continue to go on. We will continue to learn from fora like the IBBI with the help of WWF and everybody else, and hopefully make a big difference and a contribution to India's commitment at Paris on afforestation, which I do believe is a very, very aggressive commitment. But if we achieve it, it will make a big difference to our country. Thank you.